Welcome into the Friday Night 360 AZ preview show. The 2018 season has officially come to its conclusion. We crowned 4A, 5A, and 6A state champions this past weekend. We've got a great final show of 2018 for you today. First up, we're going to have AIA Executive Director David Hines joining us. Then we'll have Richard Taylor, Centennial Head Coach and your 5A state champions, coming on, as well as Braden Liebrock, 6A state champion Chandler Wolves, and Nate Polk from Saguaro, your 4A state champions. So with that, let's go ahead and bring in AIA Executive Director David Hines. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on.
Good deal. Just to start out, what are your overall takeaways from this 2018 season? We had repeat champions in these first top three divisions.
Yes, we did. We actually, had very good attendance by the schools, brought people to come and support their teams. Very pleased with that. We had an opportunity to get back to ASU after the construction that they've been working on, and to be able to run our 4A, 5, and 6 at the two universities. Again, we're just really pleased that we have an opportunity to play those games at those fine facilities.
It's your second football season as the executive director. How did this season differ from year one for you?
Championship-wise, not a lot different. As we saw, it was a repeat of pretty much last year at the 4, 5, and 6A level, and even at the 3 and 2A level, we had teams that are consistently up there. So, as a association, we are looking at during the next 2-year block to reclassify football different than our other sports. So we have been working almost for a year, looking at different models, different things that we could potentially do. The main focus of the committee is, number one, safety of the kids. Number two is competitive regular season games. 3 is competitive postseason games. And then the last one is promoting and marketing the sport of football and our championships. So obviously we've had teams that have been very successful. And so one of the things that we're looking is to be able to place schools that are on the high end of the scale, to be able to move them up to where they are probably more competitive, and we have a little more competitive playoff and tournament. On the flip side, we also have teams on the lower end of the scale that are just really struggling. And so there's an opportunity potentially that we move some of those teams down a conference and be able, through scheduling and some of these moves, is to create more competitive games during the regular season and the postseason.
When we last talked, you mentioned this process that you were going to be going through with specifically football and the realignments. What was I know you're still collecting the data. How much longer will you be collecting that data? And what, if there's any takeaways, what's been most surprising about that data?
The most surprising is, it's not necessarily that surprising, is it's kind of tough to get 222 schools on the same page. Everybody has kind of their own take on things. What is consistent is there's probably 8 or 9 schools that really do need to compete at a higher level, and there's probably 11 or 12 schools that probably need to move down. That they are just really struggling. And we want to be able to bring back programs, meaning we want them to build their programs. What we really found is attendance at a school is not an indicator of football success. So that's one of the takeaways that we have. And we are going to collect data all the way through next football season. So even we're looking at mainly a plan. We have, if it started today, we kind of have a grouping of schools. But if we go through next year, my anticipation is that most of the schools that we would move up would still be at the schools that are at the top end that we'd move up. Maybe what might differ a little bit, schools at the bottom. There's some that are trending differently than some other schools. Some schools are on their way back up. So all that information gives us the most accurate when we start the new 2-year block.
How about some of these schools that realigned this season? We had some schools move up into 6A, Queen Creek, Chaparral, as well as Liberty. Some schools move up from 3A to 5A with Castile, and they were a playoff contender. What did you see there with those divisions being realigned? How did that help?
Well, I think that provided some more competition during the regular season. Those schools with good programs, that's kind of an indication of what we're trying to do with everybody. We found that Queen Creek and Chaparral can compete up at the 6A level, and we found that Castile can compete at the 5A level. And so I think all of that gives us good feedback to go, if we move teams up, it's not to punish them, it's to provide more competitive games throughout the regular season and the postseason, because really the goal of the association is we don't really want to be able to know who's going to win the state championship before the season starts.
This is AIA Executive Director David Hines joining us here on the Friday Night 360 AZ preview show. With early signing day coming up next week, what do you see as the benefit of these kids kind of solidifying the future of their academic and athletic careers, and do you see a downfall with this early signing period?
Well, I think the positive part is then they're not being hounded by college coaches during their season or during the year. Once they make the commitment or are able to sign, then they can put that behind them, concentrate on their schoolwork as they're finishing up or their seasons, and then concentrate on graduating and making sure they keep their GPA up and maintaining their classes. And then that way they're not, that recruiting process is a very difficult time when coaches from all over are hounding you and they want you, and until you actually commit, everybody's still up for grabs, and I think it becomes very time consuming and basically it's not annoying, but it's just so constant. Kids need a break. And I think that if they sign early, I don't really see a real negative piece on that. I think the only other thing is kids that are late maturers, late bloomers. Some of those kids need that extra semester to mature and have an opportunity to go on.
You just wrapped up the football season and fall sports. Now let's look ahead. What's in store for you and the AIA for the winter sports and the rest of the academic year?
Well, we're looking forward to the winter. Basketball's going, wrestling's going, soccer's going. We anticipate some great play and great tournaments for that moving into the spring. As an association, we're working on a strategic plan for the next 3 years, so we're highly involved with that. And one of the best things we have going is we've created a student leadership group, and this spring we are going to host a student leadership summit where we're going to ask a female and male athlete from each school to come and be a part of it. It's going to be the same day as our athletic director meeting in April, and the intent is that those kids can go back and create student leadership programs at each of their schools.
So will it be a student from each school being chosen, or just one from each district?
One boy and one girl from each school.
Okay, cool. And
so
how
we're hoping to have, so with 270 schools, we're hoping, for 500 plus kids that would be able to be there.
How would that selection process go through?
The school would be able to nominate a boy and a girl to represent the school.
Very, very cool. Well, we appreciate the time. Enjoy your holiday season and this transition into the winter sports.
Thank you guys very much for including me in your show.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
You too. AIA Executive Director David Hines joining us there. The most interesting thing to me every time we speak with him is this realignment stuff. I know after these state championship games, there was a lot of Saguaro should be in 5A, Saguaro should be in 6A. But I think something that's lost is that there's a process to this. They're not just going to say, okay, they've dominated this, we're just going to move them up because we see this. No, there's a lot more that goes into that. And as he mentioned, the data and all of that collecting is still ongoing process.
And you're dealing with over 200 schools. So he mentioned there are those 8 or 9 that are probably the elite, but there's also probably about 11 or 12 that need to be moved down and adjusted. And it's like any league. You talk about the NBA and how they don't want the bottom feeders consistently that are constantly struggling and at the top of the draft. The AIA wants a full span of competition, but football is just so unique. I think it's a good move that they're collecting this data. They're doing their due diligence. They have 2 years, but he already said that the data is pretty overwhelming. So if they had to do it today, he has a pretty good idea of where they're at. So I think that this is a really good move moving forward. Look, we had back-to-back in 4 of the 6 divisions. I don't think that's necessarily in a vacuum a bad thing, but there have been so many consistent programs that have had a stranglehold. I think it is time for the fan bases and really everybody in this community is clamoring to see what these top teams can do when they're going head to head. But they have to put it on the schools to go ahead and schedule that game. And there's a lot of things that go into it, especially now that a lot of out-of-state competition is coming in. So that's usually 1 or 2 less games for these elite programs to go ahead and schedule. I think that this is a good move moving forward.
What is your opinion on how these teams that were realigned this season, how that fared? I mean, I was out at that Higley-Castile playoff game there, and it was exciting and it was competitive. And when you look at that kind of game, you see that there was a benefit to Castile moving up to 5A.
Well, in Higley, that was a game where neither one of those teams were in 5A last year. So the fact that I feel like a lot of these ones that moved up really showed they belonged. Liberty was like a 4 or a 5 seed. Queen Creek, if Devin Larson doesn't get injured, I think that they're a player in the postseason. Obviously, Chaparral dealt with some injuries as well. They were kind of the lowest of those 3 that made that jump up. But they made the playoffs. They showed they belonged. And I think for a lot of them, they're usually pretty hesitant to move up, and deservedly so. It's usually pretty much better competition. But I feel like a lot of them showed it no matter what jump they were making. And I think it was a good move for a lot of these schools that had to make the jump down. I think Desert Edge is probably more of a 4A school than a 5A school with the numbers they're getting. And they showed that they were a top 4 team. Horizon was a team that might struggle a little bit in 6A, just numbers-wise. I think they're better suited at 5A. So I think overall there were some really good decisions that were made in this past realignment.
And in talking to these coaches as well, they like that extra competitiveness. I know we talked to Queen Creek head coach Travis Sherman at the beginning of the season about moving up to 6A, and he was excited about the increased competition. And as you mentioned, some unforeseen circumstances kind of changed the course of the season that they were hoping for. But good stuff there from AIA Executive Director David Hines. When we come back, we're going to have Centennial head coach Richard Taylor. Keep it right here on the Friday Night 360 AC Preview Show.